Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I hope my clickbait on the right here got you. This presentation is about your pandemic mask. Is it hurting you, and is it effective? We're going to take a look at some of the guidelines provided by the CDC and the WHO, and then take a look at some of the negative health effects that I know from research I've done independently, unrelated to the pandemic. This is a Freedom University production, the first video that we have put out. Please support and subscribe if you find this video useful. Alright, so to start off, should you wear a mask? Some of the common reasons why people say they wear a mask. One, it is the socially responsible thing to do. You'd like to make sure that you are keeping those around you safe, and you decide to wear a mask for that reason. Because of number two, you'd like to play it safe. You're not sure. There's a lot of conflicting information for a mask, against a mask. You just decide, I'm going to go ahead and wear the mask because I'm not sure and it sounds like the safer play. And three, social pressure. I find this one to be the most common reason, whether people admit it or not, as to why they actually wear a mask. I know personally, as I walk down the streets here in Philadelphia, I get a lot of looks for not wearing a mask on the streets. God forbid you wear the mask inappropriately. I've had multiple people come up to me and tell me that I should be wearing a mask. That's one of the main reasons why I've decided to voice my opinion as to why I don't feel it's appropriate to wear a mask. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the guidelines. The CDC and the WHO guidelines. So to start, how does COVID spread? Fomite transmission, meaning touching an exposed surface. Somebody who has a virus touches the surface, you then touch that surface, and you touch your mouth or your face, and it gets into you that way. And the second way is through respiratory particles reaching you directly. That's spit. Is the other reason as to why you might wear a mask. So it's important to look at the guidelines as to how to wear the mask, to evaluate the effectivity of how we are actually wearing the mask. All of this you can look up yourself on the CDC website, on the WHO website, and there's a great video by Patrick Bet-David at Valuetainment that goes into this in detail. I pulled a lot of the content for this video from that video. I'll link to it in the video notes. So, quick question, food for thought. Do you think doctors scrub in and out of surgery with the same looseness that we wear our masks out in public? Of course not. Why? Because the integrity of the germ-free seal and the sterile environment is ruined the instant they leave and come back, or they even so much as pull their mask down for some water. And we'll show some more demonstrations of this later in the presentation. Guideline number one, coming from the WHO. Don't touch your mask. If you do, you should wash your hands with alcohol or hot water and soap for at least 30 seconds immediately. Number two, don't reuse your mask. If you do, you're likely wearing a contaminated mask, and you'll see more evidence of this later. Number three, remember, don't touch the front of your mask. Good thing none of us are doing that. Right, Dr. Fauci? The reason I allude to this is because Dr. Fauci on 60 Minutes about a month ago said that wearing your mask is ineffective. In particular, he said, right now in the United States, people should not be walking around wearing masks. When you are in the middle of an outbreak, the mask is not providing the protection that people think it does. There are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask, they keep touching their face, and when you think mask, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people that are ill. I'm not against it, it's fine. A quote from Dr. Fauci on 60 Minutes. The CDC recommends that the general public wear cloth masks, but states that health officials should only wear the N95. cloth masks and surgical masks do nothing to prevent exposure to a virus. It's like putting up a picket fence to keep out a mosquito. That comes from Dr. Pitar, who is one of the pioneers in speaking out against some of the guidelines that are out there today. A study at St. Paul's Hospital in Minnesota found COVID-19 virus particles size 125 nanometers, 1.25 microns. The range is 0.06 microns to 0.14 microns. The post said the N95 mask filters down to 0.03. So, the N95 mask blocks few, if any, virus particles. So, if the N95 isn't blocking the virus, what is your bandana doing, pal, besides making like a fool? CDC and WHO guidelines put out a video, particularly this one was the WHO, and in it they say, the WHO only recommends the use of the mask in specific cases. If you do not have these symptoms, you do not have to wear a mask because there is no evidence, I repeat that, there is no evidence that they protect people who are not sick. You can go find that on the World Health Organization website. Here's a quick demo, which again comes from the Patrick Bet-David Valuetainment video on wearing a mask. I highly suggest you check that out in detail. It goes through all this in probably better detail than I'm doing here. But I felt it important to put my own opinion out there. I think more people should be speaking out. If you have an opinion about this, go ahead and say it. Your blind compliance is acceptance. Okay. Here's a photo of your mask and a water bottle and your gloves using blue light to show particles before exposure to contamination. In this example, it's going to be pulling your mask down to grab a bit of water. Then you go ahead and lower your mask, take a sip of water, and here's the result from that quick sip. Look at the mask, look at your gloves, look at your face. Your mask, your face, and all your equipment is contaminated and ruined by taking a sip of water. So keep that in mind when you're at the gym, taking a sip of water, when you're at the grocery store running in quickly, you have to take a quick phone call, or for whatever reason you pull your mask down, just know that the purpose of wearing the mask is now completely defeated. Washing your mask. You should wash your mask before each use. That is for those of us in the general public that use cloth masks, and that means every time you take it on and off. Again, recommendation from the CDC. And storing your mask. Anytime you are not using your mask, it should be stored in a clean place. Check. CDC and WHO guidelines. Who we are actually applying this in public. How? Sorry about that. So, I'm sure many of you have seen this. We go into a restaurant, we go up to the host or hostess, we have to wear a mask, but when we go sit down, it's okay to pull the mask down, put it on the table, put it in your pocket. It's okay to eat outside in public, in groups, close quarters, but not okay to be inside in close quarters. A lot of that comes from the volume of exposure, which we'll get into later in this presentation. But man, this is laughable that you can take your mask off once you're inside and generally move freely. I was at a pool the other day, a public pool, and you had to wear your mask past the host or hostess, but the minute you get inside, you can take it off and swim freely. So if pulling your mask down for a sip of water contaminates everything, how is the things we're seeing in public okay? But just keep on wearing your mask. So the conclusion to this piece is, obviously, we're all following the CDC and WHO guidelines, right? No, not right. Wearing a mask to prevent the spread of the virus is ineffective. It's ineffective in the way in which we wear them and use them, and the masks that most of us are using, as fashionable as they are ineffective. And as Dr. Fauci said on 60 Minutes, healthy people should not wear a mask. Moving quickly through the second part here, just a note, this is from my own independent research. I've done my own studies for various reasons related to my own health prior to the pandemic, and that's why I was against wearing a mask from the start. Breathing is severely underrated as a staple in our own health in today's society by Western medicine. You can deep dive into this. Some of the recommendations are look up Ron Penna, the founder of Quest Nutrition, Normal Breathing, The Key to Vitality by Artur Rekhamov. Apologies for butchering that name. Take a look at the work of Ben Greenfield and in his book Boundless, and he touches on Wim Hof, who I'd recommend looking into as well, going into deep dive into breathing and its relation with overall health. In particular here, I want to talk about how breathing plays a critical role in our health via our emotions, our internal chemistry, our including our neurochemistry, and the hormones that we put out. An increase in the level of CO2 causes the hemoglobin in the red blood cells to dump their precious oxygen, which will lower oxygen levels in the body. That comes from Boundless by Ben Greenfield. So while wearing a mask, you continue to draw in less oxygen compared to normal, and you inhale more CO2, your own CO2 that is, and I'll hit on that in a minute, which causes physical stress. How? It's through the HPA axis, the hypothalamic adrenal pituitary gland. The HPA axis is important in controlling your stress and your CO2 levels. So mask breathing, which is shallow and low oxygen, releases cortisol. Cortisol, like anything else, is okay in small doses, much like the concept of hormesis. A little bit of stress strengthens, like the wear and tear of working out your muscles, so that it can grow back stronger. The body has two modes: the sympathetic, the stressful flight or fight state, and the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest state. This is all part of the autonomic nervous system, which is controlled along the HPA axis. The HPA axis gets its signals from your breathing. Your body is in one of the two modes. There is no middle ground. You're either in fight or flight, or you're in rest and digest. And the HPA axis regulates the stress, the mood, the digestion, and most importantly, our immune function. Here's a look at it. For time, I'm not going to go through it. This is the actual process that ends with the release of stress, putting you in the fight or flight state, which, as we know, lowers your immunity. And when you lower your immunity, you are now open to disease, which is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing during a pandemic. Further, it leads to long-term disease. You go and do your own research. 80% of doctors' visits are stress-related. Stress and inflammation are at the root cause of most major diseases in today's society, even though this is not commonly accepted by healthcare professionals. And fun fact, stress diverts blood flow away from the frontal lobe, where we do our reasoning, to the hindbrain, because that's where our coordination is in our brain activity, because it anticipates upcoming fight or flight. A motor function, aka wearing the mask makes you dumber. Closed corridors with the virus. So if you do have the virus and you're wearing a mask, you're breathing, especially if you're wearing the proper mask, an N95, you're breathing into a closed quarters in a high concentration of breathing in the virus. The high volume exposure to the virus is the biggest problem. I've got friends who are doctors working in COVID wards saying it's the people that have high exposure to the virus that can't build up an immunity. This is why wearing a mask makes no sense, especially if you have the virus. Now let's discuss how the mask is and affects your microbiome. So a lot of new science is supporting that the microbiome is key in health. It's key as part of our endocrine system, the creation and control of our hormones, and key in our neurochemistry. 50% of the immune system is found in the gut. The gut houses the microbiome, which is a collection of trillions of bacteria that play critical roles in our overall health. We wouldn't make it one day without our gut bacteria. In fact, the gut bacteria was likely here before us. Where do we get this bacteria? From the environment around us, from touching, from breathing, from eating, and naturally ingesting and interacting with the bacteria in environment. This is how our immune systems work. We get a little taste of some of the bacteria, and our body learns to tag it, recognize it, and deal with it. If it's a threat, it learns how to deal with it. If it's something that's good and has benefits, it learns how to work it in. It's critical that we continue to build our microbiomes, and what the mask does is it stops us from ingesting bacteria that's around us in our environment. Similarly, using antibacterials and sanitizers kill your microbiome. This had been a huge pet peeve of mine well before the pandemic hit us. Using these cleaning agents in my house and out at restaurants is very frustrating, especially in eating environments. But at this point, we're spraying it everywhere. We're spraying it in cities with chemicals designed to kill all bacteria, including our gut bacteria, our microbiome. And this is likely getting into our water, which is likely us further ingesting it. This will be happening in schools, damaging the health of our children. Say will be, provided that our schools actually reopen coming up soon here. And this is happening at restaurants. It has always been happening at restaurants, but now it's taken to extreme, spraying tables with even more dangerous chemicals in greater volumes, and it's even more likely that we're ingesting it as a result of it being right there in our eating environment. So, conclusions. 1, masks, and particularly the way we are using them, are ineffective at preventing the spread of a virus. 2, masks have serious adverse health consequences, though these are not obvious and immediate. So that's my stance, is why I prefer not to wear a mask, and I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening in. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe so that we can put together more informational content for your viewing pleasure. Have a good night.